Hi, I'm Jessica Lauretti. I am the head of RYOT Studio at the Huffington Post. I run our creative agency that creates branded and white label advertising content for brands.
Cool. Marc.
Marc Maleh. I run the prototype studio and the data science team at RGA, doing a lot of work across on the data side, machine learning, and on the prototype studio side, hardware, virtual reality, augmented reality, things like that.
Resh.
Hi, I'm Resh Sidhu. I'm the creative director of Framestore's VR studio here in New York. We've been responsible for creating some great VR experiences over the past 4 years. Some of you may have heard of them, the Mars Bus. We've done the first kind of walk-around VR experience when the Vive hadn't even come out, and we were using motion capture way back then, and that's the Merrill Trailscape experience. And we're going to be debuting a new VR experience today on Daydream's Google platform for J.K. Rowling's new Fantastic Beasts experience.
Excellent, and that's day one of Daydream, right?
It is day one of Daydream.
We are part of the Publicis Group. I help lead commerce innovation. I sit in our Boston office and I lead I call it our convergence lab, and really it's the intersection of physical and digital worlds, in particular how, particularly in commerce, right, with physical things, and that's where AR and VR come into play for me.
Okay, so I want to start by just asking you all a little bit about how's business? You know, you're in the business of selling 360 VR to brands. You're kind of pushing a new medium to them. Where's the money coming from? Is it growing gangbusters? Are things looking up? Tell me a little bit about that. Maybe Marc, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I think the space is interesting and challenging because it is new. So to a degree, you actually have to have clients that you work with that are somewhat brave, right? And there's not in this world yet a great way to measure success and ROI with some of these platforms. I think we've seen a lot of brands do interesting things. I mean, the Mars Bus is a great example, right? Very small use case of number of people that are going to do it, right? So trying to convince a client to actually invest in something like that when you're essentially saying to them at this point, you want to do it for the PR buzz, right? You want to do it for the fact that you're going to be written up in Fast Company or Wired or something like that, or you're going to win a Cannes Lion, right? Since not everybody has a Vive at home, an Oculus at home. I think as the hardware changes, though, a lot of our clients are actually coming to us and asking for more of these content-driven solutions. I mean, we worked with Volvo a year ago with Framestore actually on an experience, and that was all around the fact that they didn't have a physical car in the US that they wanted to start selling, so VR via Google Cardboard and an actual auto show was a great example in a way that they could do it, but again, kind of like a small use case for them. So I think that's kind of the challenge in the space, is people are asking for it, but they sometimes aren't brave enough to fully jump in.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, is that the case for you as well?
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I feel like we have tons of interest from brands. Like literally every day we get another RFP from so-and-so and so-and-so and being like, yeah, we want to learn more about this. Can you put together proposals for these things? There are a few people who are really like pushing it all the way down the line to follow through with the actual project. But that's going to change. I mean, I think that this is just all so new. And a lot of the product brands are like heavily investing, totally pushing this in the next year. I think you've seen 2016 as be like kind of like the year of VR, or at least maybe it feels like that because there are like thousands of VR conferences, but it's like sort of on everybody's mind. It's like sort of in the zeitgeist right now. So I think that while you're seeing these things get pushed, people don't have the headsets yet. They will have them in a year and 2 years. You know what I mean? Like it's all evolving. The way Facebook is really pushing 360 video, millions of people are seeing this content in a way that they weren't before, and that's going to change the way that brands interact with it.
And Brett, you're working in a retail, or very interested in the retail context.
Yeah.
Is there as much interest from people who have direct sales goals in producing VR, AR?
Not yet. Especially with my colleagues here, the brands that we work with, it's Whirlpool, Miller Coors, you may have seen some Reebok stuff. It's a lot of 360-degree video stuff that really agencies are doing for the most part, to kind of give you that experience, to extend the brand a little bit, and the dollars tend to come from media departments. We have done some work with Tesla, for example, where we're building true VR environments to give you that experience, but that's slower to come. It's bigger dollars. We're talking 6 figures to produce some of this stuff when fees get added up. I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah.
I will say, from a commerce perspective, we are particularly interested in phone-based AR, right? The ability to take all these data signals and data that are rubbed, to hold my phone up to an aisle and say, that's a gluten-free product, right? Right? Or give me user ratings reviews when I look at this, or hey, I really like that jacket, right? The computer vision and all these technologies work really well today, and as we increase with better bandwidth and CPU, all the things you mentioned that we're going to go, we envision our world where that behavior that's not there yet by consumers, that they'll hold their phone up and expect to get something, right? Overlaid in the matrix, if you will.
And Resh, it seems like Framestore is just on a tear. You guys are working with more and more clients.
Yeah, I mean, we've had such an amazing journey. The VR studio, we've been, our very first VR experience was the Game of Thrones VR experience. And the studio at that time, there were three people super excited about receiving the first DK1 headset and trying to find, like you're saying, a client that was brave enough and had the funding to kind of go do a VR experience. But what the team discovered back then is we're not in the business just of selling VR headsets. We're in the business of telling stories. And VR is a whole new medium. And if you want to connect with your audience and tell stories in a profoundly different way, then VR has that sex appeal. But the challenge we have at the moment is educating clients about when it's right to use VR and when it's not. Because you're right, a lot of the content out there could be perfectly well served in a YouTube ad. And if it could be, then that's where it should live. So our business at the moment, creatively, we have to wear many hats. We have to educate our clients about when it's right to use VR and the impact it can have, for example, like the Mars bus, or when it's not right. And when it's not right, what we're there is, we're there to help them navigate this minefield. The headsets, there's new headsets coming out every day. I often say I feel like I'm going to school every day. I'm learning something new every day. 2016 is definitely the year of the hardware coming out. What we're going to see in the next 2 to 5 years is exploration about the content. And the content is going to be the thing that decides whether this medium lives or dies. Because people are hungry for content. And the challenge is creating content that is good and adds value.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I'm interested. I know that all of you spend a lot of time educating, essentially, your clients, but also your own companies, essentially, about what it is you're doing, the resources you need, the types of talent you need, and the process. We were struck, working with Viacom this summer. Our experiment was really about how fast can we prototype in VR? How fast can we prototype reasonably good experiences in that time? So from thinking about those issues, what are you doing to educate both internally and externally around the opportunity? Maybe I'll start back with Jessica.
Well, we're doing tons. I mean, it's constantly having to educate people on this. I think one of the 2 questions that we get most often are, what is the difference between VR and 360 video? And where is the close-up?
Where's the close-up?
Where's the close-up?
Yeah.
The clients are always saying, oh, where's the close-up in this video? I think that what I try to talk about is that while VR feels like a natural extension of video and filmmaking, it actually has nothing to do with it. And I think that if you want to be successful at VR, you should forget everything that you know about filmmaking, because it's not at all similar. You don't have any of this typical cinematic tools of cinematography, of editing, of juxtaposition, pacing, all of these things that you rely on to tell stories, you no longer have access to. So you need to think about storytelling in a way that is more akin to either theater or UX design, honestly. It's just dramatically different. So I think that is the place that we're trying to really get to right now, is being really experimental with how we tell stories. How do we use what happens around the camera, set the stage for characters and spaces and environments, and to tell the story like that, instead of relying on some of these other things where we're just making documentaries but in 360 when they don't really need to be in 360, but really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in that space.
So Shaki kind of made this point earlier. He said, everybody's thinking in 2D. That we're all trained, literally the entire technology, media, advertising, everybody's trained to think in 2D. What are you doing to get out of that, Marc?
Yeah, I mean, so with kind of the education aspect, I akin it a little bit to when mobile became a thing, right? Like, you had all these designers, you had all these developers out there that were, designing for a mouse, a keyboard, and your laptop or your desktop, right? And I think with all these new platforms coming out with VR and AR and, God knows how many headsets at this point, designers and technologists are evolving, and they have to evolve because, it's no longer a mouse and a keyboard. So some of it is, what you just have to try it, right? You have to just start making some things, and I think it's something that my team and I at RGA evangelize a lot internally is like, we have all the hardware, we're going to learn how to do it, but we're going to spend as much time teaching the rest of the agency how to do it. And our clients, frankly, a lot of times they don't get it, right? And I mean, they don't understand that is a process, and you can show them maybe a PowerPoint deck or a PDF that is like, we're going to do this awesome VR thing, and they're going to look at it, but they're looking at it in 2D. That's not the same. And bringing them actually into the studio and having them put on, Oculus or Vive or HoloLens for the first time, it's just like you see the light bulbs going off, and they're just like, oh, that's what you want to do. Like, now I get it. So I think, like, it's their willingness to actually spend the time and the dollars, frankly, to just go and make something. And maybe you're just spending a week or two doing it, but you're making this proof of concept that, they can go to their boss and they can say, hey, I want you to come into RGA. They made this prototype. You have to come in because it's on the Vive, or it's, or we're going to do a version of it on Google Cardboard and they're going to mail it to you, whatever it is, right? Like, I think they have to be willing to kind of take those steps for their own education. And frankly, most of them want to do that because, it would be silly for them, similar going back to like the mobile thing, if they were like, I'm not going to worry about learning about this like mobile thing, right? Or I'm not going to worry learning about, how to design for a banner ad on a mobile device, right? It's like they have to now be educated in this space, so they want it.
I just want to, because we're very similar agencies here. Excellent point about we are investing in talent, right? So somebody mentioned 3D modeling, right? We need people that know how to do that stuff, right? Or deal with Unity and all the other tools that we have, and have user experience or XD people that can think in that different paradigm. I will say, when we bring people in, right, they got to come in, right? And we have 1 or 2 HTC Vives, and we've got 10 clients that come in. That's a slow demo process, right? You got to put the helmet on and clean it. That's why I like the phone, right? Because we have scale. But how else can we figure out how to show a kind of a one-to-many type of thing? And so we're starting to think about projection mapping, right? How do you create this feeling of presence, right? You'll get to try on the Vive, but how can I also tell my story with these other technologies, right? I know we think in terms of headsets, but we have all these wonderful technologies and smart people that can make us feel like we're inside of a Best Buy on a Black Friday to elicit sight, sound, and motion. And as agencies, we're usually trying to sell you a better app or better website, but it's got to be delivered in the context of the mom with 2 kids that's shopping on Black Friday in a New York City Best Buy, right? That's what we're trying to convey in some of these cases. But we need to think about, for us, when we sell, how do you sell to a larger audience? Because we can't, pass the helmet on and on and on and on and on.
Resh, maybe just to drill into this question a little bit, when you're in that sale process, how do you even think about kind of the early stage mood board or the prototype or what you show the client? What are you doing right now? What's working?
Yeah, I mean, I think Framestore is very lucky. We are very well positioned to kind of adopt this new medium. I mean, Framestore's been around over 30 years. They're a visual effects company and responsible for movies like Gravity, just recently The Martian, Tarzan. So actually, our creative directors, our artists, our modelers have been thinking in 360 degrees for many years. So we're kind of like the old vanguard of VR, and adopting VR was very easy for us. And having that resource and that powerhouse behind the VR studio has kind of been something that is a little bit of our secret sauce. We fundamentally have changed our creative process. I come from a digital advertising background, working within VR. Everything that I knew, you're absolutely right, Jessica, everything that we knew we have to put aside. We have to learn from it and take elements from it. A lot of theatrical learnings, a lot of filmmaking learnings, but essentially in VR, the user is now the camera. That's a tremendously scary thing for a lot of filmmakers that we work for, where traditionally they had the power to direct the shot, fade to black. There is no fade to black in VR. You have to think in 360 degrees of storytelling, and you have to make the experience work so much harder. So what we've done is we've assembled a team of individuals from very different and diverse backgrounds. We have architects, we have designers, storytellers, data scientists, strategists, all working hard and collaborating together. Techs, developers, we are all the creative director of the project because it requires so much more thinking to solve these tremendous challenges that we have. The way we work with clients now is I no longer take a brief from a client because what we tend to do is bring them in and have a workshop. And we run these workshops with our clients to do two things. One, make sure that they've been on a VR experience. Trying Google Cardboard is not a reflection of what true VR is. So it's important that they come in and they try Google Cardboard, the Gear VR, the Daydream, up to the Vive, and even the PSVR. So they can have an understanding of the difference of placing a cardboard on your head that is driven by a mobile phone versus having controllers in your hand.
Right.
Once they've done that, then I ask them to give me a brief. And the brief should always be about what is it you want your consumers to feel when they take that headset off. VR is very much a consumer-first medium, not a brand-first. And those brands that work with us are the ones that are brave enough to actually understand that and understand that VR has a strategic role in their business model moving forward. It's not a knee-jerk. Jumping on the VR bandwagon, that was what this year was all about. There are not going to be any first. Now it's going to be how can it fit with our business model, where does it fit with our strategy, and how are we using it to connect with our consumers?
So just to pick up on that a little bit, if this was the year where maybe it was a bit bandwagony, there wasn't as much bravery really necessary to make your first go in VR. 2017, I've heard some people say, we might experience a little bit of a disillusionment in 2017. Maybe the headset sales aren't quite what people had hoped. Maybe something else happens. There's a recession. We'll see. But what happens in the context of 2017? Do you think? What are you looking at for the next year? What do you anticipate? And how do you think if there is a moment where you see some journalists writing that story like, oh, the VR thing, it's not happening yet. How do we get through that? Brett.
You looking at me? I think we're going to have more of the same from our client base. We have no shortage of really cool VR, AR ideas, but usually we typically at agencies like to work from what is the problem we're trying to solve first, right? Or what is the story we want to tell and find things. This way it's a little bit different. Like we're not quite sure what problem we're trying to solve with certain things. Certainly there's utilities we could build, right? For financial services clients, very interested in how you, if you're investing in a company over in Asia, how to be there to see the factory floor, right? There's no shortage of really cool ideas. But I think the dollars are still going to be kind of that test and learn because not everybody's done it, and they're going to graduate from the 360-degree video and figure out, to your point, like maybe that should be on YouTube or Facebook, and then how do we, figure out how to get this at scale in terms of a true VR environment, right? I will lastly say too, retail environments. Some of you may have seen that John Lewis, the UK retailer, tried to, for the holidays, attach a cord to a cardboard and look at things like. Putting VR in physical retail spaces, it's kind of wonky, right? But hopefully we can kind of figure that out. Like, how do we do it better at events to get more of the mainstream people? We need to figure that out.
2017, up or down?
I think part of it is going to depend on the clients you're talking to. I mean, you look at the people who are up here, like we're from agencies and studios, and I think the perception is that we're always talking to the CMO side of a business, right? But I think the reality is that model changes a lot, and it might, the marketing person at an agency, they might be measured on how many purchases are being transacted through an e-com site. Whereas, so they might not actually have a need for, say, VR, AR experience because maybe they don't get it. Two, they're like, all I care about is getting more people to purchase product X and more eyeballs on this. Whereas if you're actually talking to somebody on the product side of a client, to me, that's actually maybe where there's more opportunity with a lot of our clients, and that's what we're slowly starting to do a lot more of that type of work, just purely because there might be a functional reason that they need a VR or an AR experience to actually improve their business. Maybe they were doing something in a very antiquated way previously, and now all of a sudden, let's just say they have a huge machine that weighs like 8 tons, and they can't show all these people like this physical machine because it weighs 8 tons and you can't ship it around the world. But you could actually just send them a headset and be like, hey, like this machine is having this technology problem. You're not here. You can actually look at this thing in virtual reality and help us maybe troubleshoot it. That's a product problem. That's not a marketing problem.
Okay.
So to me, I think those are some potential interesting areas that also could explode and kind of take advantage of the technology in different ways.
So I'm GE. I've got a giant turbine. I might want to show it to you.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Resh and Jessica, either one of you, thought on that 2017 optimism versus pessimism sort of thing?
I don't know. I mean, I can't really begin to speculate on what the next year of business will be like. But I do think what we're really interested in, back to your point earlier about this is all right now about experimenting and making content. And I think that that's the space that we're really trying to inhabit and thinking about what are the ways that we can continue to push these storytelling opportunities. We're very interested in AR and have been playing around with that. We're very interested in interactivity and have been thinking a lot about experiences there. What if we could create a story or an interactive experience where you're walking down the street in Aleppo and you could kick a rock, kick a piece of rubble, go sit in someone's apartment where they used to live, pick up an actual photo booth and look at photos of families who are struggling and suffering and have gone through an experience that would completely change the way that you understood what was happening in Syria and the refugee crisis around the world. With that is obviously a great responsibility to tell that story well, but that is the place that's interesting for us at RYOT, is to tell those stories, continue to use technology as, this is kind of just one of the tools in the toolkit, right, of the greater mission that we're on, which is to tell stories to help people understand the world that they live in and to make sense of it and to try to do something good for the world.
Resh.
Absolutely. I think 2017 and 18 is going to be such an exciting year for VR. And let me just put it into a little bit of context. We're only in year 4 of making content. Yeah. It's come on, chill out, everybody. We've got to give the content makers a chance. Right. We're going to see a tremendous amount of amazing VR and AR content. And the content that is going to make you guys go home and tell somebody about it, or the next panel up here in the next 2 years talk about it, is a content that either, moves you, tells you a story, whether that's in journalism, excites you, or whether you're being attacked in a zombie apocalypse. It's entertainment, it's joy, it's information. And when that's done well, and you have an emotional connection to that story, you want to tell the whole world about it. Very early on, in the early days of mobile, you guys remember the very early brick phone, right? That was over $3,000. No one ever fathomed that phone would now essentially be sitting in every one of your back pockets right now, and it will fundamentally change the way we interact and engage as consumers. I think we are on the cusp of a whole new medium, and it's only just beginning, but we have to give ourselves time.
Cool.
It took over 100 years of storytelling to get to where we are today, and you guys want us to solve it in a year. It's not going to happen. So we do have to manage expectations, but we are beginning to see, Steven Spielberg, Ridley Scott, some amazing powerhouse directors using VR, and in the next few years, we're going to see it infiltrate in journalism, in education, in, with VR and AR and AI. I was at IBM Watson just a few weeks ago looking at how they are using VR and cognitive learning to help kids in classrooms. There is a tremendous value to this medium, and those that are excited about it will continue to try and push it and see where it can add value.
That sets up our panel after the coffee break very well, which is going to focus on what media companies are doing to create brand new content. I want to take some of your questions. We have some mic runners around the room, I believe, who are ready So I'll take the first hand that I see, and we'll see where we can start. Yes, sir, back there in the back.
3D was, went way up the hype cycle and essentially crashed except in cinema. Is the same thing going to happen to VR?
Okay, so the 3D TV, 3D cinema question. Resh?
We often get this analogy all the time. I mean, I have clients say it to me all the time. What's different from VR and AR and 3D TV? And I tell you what was different. 3D technology wasn't bad. It was amazing technology, fantastic technology. What failed 3D TV was the content. There just wasn't enough content. Consumers were hungry for it, but there wasn't enough content. And if the content does not live up to the reality of this technology, it will fail. So that's why we have a tremendous responsibility to make sure that the VR content we are putting out there is good. I see so much subpar VR content, and it infuriates me. Because what will happen is a gentleman like yourself will try VR, and you will say, that was really meh, it was boring. And you will think VR is bad, and that's not true. So it's very important you go out and you experience as much VR as possible to be able to establish what is good VR versus bad VR.
Okay. One more question, please. Yes, right here, ma'am.
What would you guys like to see from some of the VR giants like Google Daydream or Oculus? What would you like to see them investing more in or building more partnerships?
So what do we want to see? Samsung, Google, Facebook, the rest of them, what should they be investing in terms of partnerships or opportunities? Yeah, Brett.
Just from an AR perspective, would love to see the handset OEMs start to build in that AR lens, right? Apple made an acquisition of Mateo for some reason, right? Samsung certainly talking to different folks with using computer vision. Want to see that happen.
I read something about an Apple patent this week around augmented reality mapping, which is interesting.
Apple are always bringing out patents.
Yeah.
They need to bring out a headset. Actually, right, Ken? They're actually doing a tremendous amount already. The hardware manufacturers have a clear understanding that the hardware is there. It's absolutely going to improve. It's going to get cheaper. It's going to get smaller. It's going to fit in my back pocket. They're investing in content. They're working with indie content creators. They're running workshops. They're constantly inviting those that are creating content to share the lessons learned. The VR community is a tremendously exciting community to be in because it's very much open arms and sharing what we're learning to make sure that we can actually get to that point of great content as fast as possible.
I'd like to add that, I think, and I'm going to combine kind of the first question with your question. There's this intersection between the content, the hardware technology, and the consumer that I think is still somewhat problematic, and I think that's actually maybe why 3D TV had a hard time as well. You talk about the content not necessarily being there, but I would also argue that, my parents bought a 3D TV, and even though I told them not to, and it was weird being home, sitting in a room with a pair of glasses on. You're taken out of the moment of what you've been used to for so many years. And I think right now with the hardware changing and becoming cheaper. You don't look like you have a computer strapped to your face. That merge of the hardware changing its form factor, the content really, really improving, and the consumer just changing their habit a little bit, I think is what's going to be the tipping point. But I think once one of those things is removed from that equation, we might have some problems.
I would just add on a really practical note that what we need is some consistency across formats. Everything that we make is published on our O&O website, our social platforms, and our mobile app, and those are all completely different experiences, and we have to make things that fit into what you could watch on YouTube and on Facebook and in a headset and on your desktop, and that's incredibly hard to do, just from a production standpoint, or trying to think through how to put together these stories, but also on a post-production side where you're just making several versions of the same thing that you then have to upload across 55 different platforms is very annoying and time-consuming.
I'll take one more question from this side, perhaps. Yes, sir.
How are you validating your creative and design decisions with this new medium? Because it's sort of a combination of filmmaking and also maybe video game design, maybe interface design. So there's a lot of questions I have about just how do you decide who your users are? How do you decide the means that you funnel them through the process that you want them to take?
game designers do a lot of play testing. Are you all play testing?
Well, we have
as
game
part of the
designers in our
process?
team.
Yeah.
We use a lot of learnings from the gaming industry, the theatrical industry. Like I said, our team is. If you said to me a year ago my team would look like the team it does now, I would say you're kidding me. It is a very unusual mix of very different mindsets coming together to solve these problems that we just, you can't Google the answer. So you've got to have a team of individuals that can work together, understand that if the idea that you sold to the client doesn't actually work in VR, that's okay. It's okay to change the idea. In fact, you have to. We have a methodology of we test and learn every single day. It is very fast working methodology. We prototype from day one. We do not storyboard and script. That doesn't work. If a lot of our VR ideas I actually had written down as a script, our clients would have said, get the hell out of there. And we make sure that we're prototyping earlier on. Not only is the client seeing that, it's very grayscale. It's classic, oh my God, the creative director would never sign that off. But it is grayscale, and that's the only way you can deliver a valuable experience. When we use a test, we test on individuals that know nothing about the experience. We're testing where they're looking, where the story is taking them, and if it doesn't work, we throw it out and we try something new.
Yeah, and I would say I think the testing and learning is so important, and it's also making sure that, like, as I mentioned earlier, like having brave clients, but you also have to have brave creative leadership, like in your organization, right? Because they have to be willing to say, yeah, nobody's really done this before, but like that's what's going to make it cool. And as you're testing and learning, like don't just test with people who know the hardware. Like, if your target for an experience, whether that's AR, VR, a mobile experience, anything, like you have to get the right people in the room. So if you're targeting, 18-year-old, girls, bring some 18-year-old girls in to test and learn with you. Like, don't test it on, 30-year-old men and women who happen to already know all the hardware platforms. Like, that's not the person who's going to be using it.
Great. Brett, Jessica, anything to
I
add?
was just going to say, as advertisers too, and this is probably the dreaded word is, who are those startups that are going to figure out how do we inject ads into a virtual experience, right? Like, how do we monetize this stuff in a way that's not overbearing or creepy? And so looking at those companies, even like gaze metrics, where are people looking within our, right? Because we want to measure everything, and this will be no different. So anybody that's thinking about how do we measure every little thing in this and monetize it, advertisers will want to know about it.
Yeah. We're learning a lot just because since we're a media company, we have an editorial team. And so they're working every day to make these like weekly or daily 360 videos. And so that is like a very quick turnover and kind of like a churn of making things where we can get a lot of really early insights and like key learnings from things quickly that we can share throughout our team. And I think even just for me, I started on the editorial side at RYOT and spent the first 3 months making like 20 360 videos and learned so much just from doing that quick process of turning things around. And so that's been like most of our key insights come from that space.
The analytics layer is so important, right? Because it's not just, it's great if HTC or Sony with their new product, like whoever it is, right, Samsung, it's great if they say this many people bought the product, right? And that's a great data point, right? But how many people are actually engaging with the product is, I think, so much more important when you're, an advertiser, and then you can use that information to then say client X, like it's not just that, 1 million people have HTC Vive. It's actually that out of those million, they're doing this, this, and this, and they're spending this much time. And I think, the hope is that, TV and other mediums will start to normalize with VR experiences, and then everybody will start to be like, oh, we should actually invest money over here.
A lot of problems to solve for the startup community and for the big tech companies, certainly. We still haven't solved, analytics and measurement on mobile, so we've got some ways to go there. I want to thank this panel, so let's give them a round of applause. Okay?